Hey, today we're going to talk about documentation. And right now, I'm just going to give you a real quick overview of just kind of the basic parts of documentation. We'll get into the technicalities of it next time. So I'll be mentioning stuff that you may not understand yet, and that's fine. This is just introduction. So let's get to it. All right. When you use sources in your formal papers, you need to properly credit and cite them through a accepted documentation style. Not to do this is considered plagiarism. Now, you don't want to plagiarize because, one, you can fail the assignment, you could fail your course, it can end up on your academic transcript, and that's not something you want if you have to send your transcript to somebody, some boss saying that you cheated. Um, but I would rather you think more, instead of thinking about, oh, I don't want to do this because I don't want to get in trouble. I want you to think about, why would I want to do this? Because it's good for me. And it is good for you because it establishes your credibility and makes you sound even smarter than you are. You're already smart, it makes you sound smarter. It leaves a trail for future researchers. And research and using sources is about a conversation. As much as you are talking to the person on the other side of the page when you're writing, when you bring in somebody else's voice, you're adding them into the conversation. And you're talking to them by saying what you think of what they've said. Your reader is talking to you and to them by thinking, as they read what someone else has said and what you're saying. So it works that way. It's also something that when you find a source that mentions something interesting or something that might apply to your research, you may find one source and it mentions other sources in it. So it is an actually legitimate way to do research, and it helps you find other sources to use. And of course, most of all, it shows respect for those whose works you've used. You're doing a lot of work in your writing. Imagine how much work is going into professional writing. So you definitely want to make sure and give them the credit. Now, maps are a very good analogy for documentation. When we have a map, how do we figure out what all the symbols and colors mean? We've got some here, some of it's spelled out, some of it's not, but do we really know what all of these mean? We look at the map, it's the same, it's the main thing. But to understand what everything means, we have to look at the legend. And you can see from this map, there's a whole lot more in this legend that we might not even perceive by looking at the map. But why don't we write all of this information that's in the legend on the map? Well, we don't do it because, of course, it would be hard to read the map. So if we think of your paper, our papers, as the map, if we gave all of the information from sources every time we use them, it would be hard to read the paper. So instead, we take shortcuts in the map and we give all of the information on the legend. The map is your paper. The legend is your information at the end of your paper. So, in the paper, we use both attribution, that is signal phrases according to so-and-so says, and then also in-text and or parenthetical citations. So those are our shortcuts that we're using for the legend. And then at the end, so we're going to start with the legend. So this is our works cited, and it's kind of easier, I think, to start thinking about those citations with the works cited or reference, and then what goes into them. In MLA, it's a works cited. In APA, it's called a references page. In CMS or Chicago, which you may do if you're taking a history class, it's the bibliography page. What we call it and how we arrange our information depends on what language we're speaking. That is, what field or discipline are we writing in? Now, the way we arrange our information and what information we give changes depending on which language or style we're speaking. Take this word, for example, if I write it, and you'll have to look at it here. This is all the same word in different languages. You will only know what that word is if you speak or read one of those languages. Now I'm going to write it in English. Here we go. CTA, TCA, ATC. Wait, those aren't words. So even if I write it in a language we all understand, but I don't put it in the right order, I still haven't communicated. And that's a key thing, because order in these things matters, just like it does with writing the very simple word cat. You only know it's cat when I write it CAT and not TCA, because those are different things. So, in the same way that we have to put letters in order in even the most basic, simple words to get our meaning across, in our works cited in our references page, we have to put this information in order, because once you learn to read that order, it's easy to figure out what everything is. Once you learn to read CAT, you know it refers to Felis domesticus. Meow. Um, Otherwise, these letters, these way these pixels are formed, do not have anything to do with Felis domesticus. It's only because we've agreed that. So on that references page, we've agreed we will put things in certain order, and the more you learn how to do this, the citation, as you work into your professional field where you will be writing more papers in this, you'll be able to look at those sources and say, oh, here's where I find this, here's where this came from, here's when it was written. And if you want to go read that yourself, you can. So, the key thing I want you to remember, though, is you don't need to memorize it, nor should you. Look it up and follow directions. And of course, you can use online citation generators and Word's references page. Those are all valuable tools, but in the end, it is your grade and your job to make sure they have done their work right. For myself, and I've actually had students say, you know, I was using the citation generator, but it was just easier to type it up, look at the directions and type it up. That's how I feel too. I've used them. I'm all in favor of technology, and then I've ended up having to fix so much. It was easier just to type it up from the beginning. So try it whichever way you want, but in the end, if you use a generator, you use Words, MS Words references function, or Google's, or any other one, double check it, because it's your grade, and it's about how you look and you're getting it right. Okay, we're just covering APA and MLA here. That's all we're looking at. If you are doing Chicago, our writer's reference does cover it. So if you have a history class, once you learn how to do one, it's easier to learn how to do the others. It is stop and read instructions. That's all it is. Okay, so read them carefully, and you can get this 100% all the time, and that's what's important. And this is about, don't be afraid to make mistakes, to learn. You just got to try it, so I can help you and say, no, it's not that, it's this. Hey, look at page 63, see where they do that there. Whatever it is, remember here, you're making mistakes with me, so you learn how to get them right. So when you go write for other people, and specifically with documentation, we're talking about teachers, you don't have to get it wrong with them. You get it right with them. Okay, at the beginning of the APA and MLA chapters in your lovely writer's reference, sorry, had to do it. Here's MLA, so go to the tab. At the very first, there are tables of contents for each of these. APA, same thing, okay? Chicago, as I mentioned, if you're doing... you'll see, you can just see those are tables. I'll show you pictures in a minute. If you're doing a history paper or any other paper and you have to do Chicago, remember it's in your writer's reference, so you can look that up. You have the instructions there. And that's actually where you want to start. These table of content pages for how to cite are the number one step. So if we're going to cite a source, say we're going to use a source, and it is here is a book. So we're going to use a book. It's a print book. Well, in MLA, I would look under Works Cited Models, Print, boom. I'm going to go to that page. It's going to give me the instructions and a sample of how to do that. If I am going to use a podcast or a film or an image, that's somewhere in here. If I'm going to cite a lecture, somewhere in here is a lecture. You want to cite one of your teacher's lectures and cite them back to it. You would go through here, find it, go follow the instructions there, ask questions when you need help, and put it in your works cited. That's really how easy it is. Now, looking at it is sometimes kind of confusing, but if you slow down and just say, look, all this is reading instructions, you're good to go. So that's what goes at the end. What do you do in the middle? Directly to in-text citation models. Here's what I do in the middle. Now, in both of these, it is very important. There are general guidelines for signal phrases. Taking the time to read those The general guidelines for listing authors, taking the time to read these carefully is very important. The rest of this, you just want to kind of skim through and say, okay, here are my options. And then that way you know what's in there. And then you're like, oh yeah, I can cite a digital file or a map. Let me go to that. And you can cite everything. So this doesn't cover everything, but you would find what is the closest thing to it. Okay, so APA, same thing. You've got to cite on your references page. You want to cite let's see, an entire website, or you want to cite an advertisement. You go to that page, look it up, do it like it says it, ask me questions. I'm here to help you. In text, you go, look it up, here's how I do it. With in text, you want to read the first couple of these, and the same thing, general guidelines for listing authors in APA, and the rest of it, just skim through it so you know what is there and what you can look up. All right, so here's how they look. At the end of our paper, we have that works cited. This is MLA. So you can see there's the MLA header and citation. It's called works cited. If we only had one work, it would be work. We list authors in alphabetical order. Here you can see we've got people, but we also have GMC, companies. Either way, alphabetical order. And then we're just going to follow the instructions. MLA is going to tell us put a name. This is from a website. So put a name, put a title of the web page, put the website. We're going to have different things for different sources and different things between MLA and APA. Here's APA. Our APA format looks different. It has a different header. It is called references, but still alphabetical by author. And that could be, here's always, the company, Kavanaugh and Nord. These are both people. And you'll notice they actually start off with date, so it's spelled a little differently, but it gives all the information we need. Notice these are both hanging indent. So we've got that scooted over, and remember I went over how to do that in the format, and I do it in the APA format as well. We've got that paragraph spacing, that is, there's no extra space between paragraphs, so this is all equal. And again, both of those are also in the format videos, so if you've forgotten, go back and just check out those parts. So similarities, they both begin on the page following the essay, but are still part of it. You noticed here, this was page 6. Notice here, this is page 5. So we don't want to, it is not separate from your paper. If it's separate from your paper, it's like walking in naked somewhere and saying, well, no, I'm not naked. I have my clothes right here in my hand. No, doesn't work. You have to have your clothes on your body. Okay, so this works cited, this references page, it is important. It is part of your paper. They have that hanging indent. They list sources in alphabetical order according to the first things in the citation, ignoring, of course, but leaving it in A, N, and D. Double space, no extra space. Major differences, the title, the headers are different, and the order and format of the elements in each citation is different. So that's what we do with that legend. That's how we create that. But in our paper, we don't want to have every bit of that information. Imagine if every time you used a source, you had to put everything that goes into a citation. No one could read your paper, just like we couldn't read a map if it had all of the information from the legend on it. So our shortcuts inside the paper work different ways too. And Chicago uses a footnote or endnote system, but MLA and APA use systems that work in the text itself. So MLA is an author location system. Here you can see bioethicist David Resnick emphasizes that. Then we have the information, and at the end of this information, there are parentheses with a number in it. This is just the page number. There's no P in MLA, so we don't put P, PP, PG, nothing. All we need when we give a page number is just the number. Now, if we hadn't mentioned Resnick's name in our sentence, we just said one bioethicist emphasizes, then we would have our author and location in the parentheses at the end of that quote or section there. So you've got to have the author and the location in MLA papers. Generally, you'll have the author in your sentence. Not always, though. You want to be able to shake it up. So we'll have that. With APA, APA adds one more thing. It is an author date, and location system. So here we have Kavanaugh, 1986, boom, that date. The minute you mention an author's name in APA, you put the date in parentheses right after it. And then says, and we have what he says, and then buying ourselves section. And so instead of page numbers with this source, this is a website and there's section headings in it. So we have the author, Kavanaugh, 1986, date, and then location, the buying ourselves section. Here you can see that this writer is using a source that's by Sprint. So Sprint, boom, 2013. This is from a commercial. It's a video commercial. We don't have to give any location on it, so we just have to have author date there. But author date location, unless you don't need to have that location. So that's what APA does. So they use that attribution and signal phrases. We need to have our words in there. Don't ditch those and just put in the parenthetical. But then we also need to have the parentheses to put in page or page paragraph numbers, section numbers, whatever location. Your location will never go in your sentence. We wouldn't say Kavanaugh, 1986, says on page 23. Okay, we might do it with a section. In the buying ourselves section in Kavanaugh's, boom, 1986 article, he says. We can do that, but we wouldn't just put page numbers just on page 33, the author says. No, don't do that. Remember, that's a don't. Major difference is APA requires the date of the source in parentheses, boom, right after you give that author's name. So that's your general overview for documentation. And I know that it's kind of weird and everything, and this is not meant to really explain anything, just give you conceptually how it works. Your paper's a map. We want to put those shortcuts in there, so we're going to have either an MLA author date or an APA author date location. And then at the end, we have that works cited or that reference page, and that's our legend that gives all the information. And what we'll be doing soon is, of course, studying and practicing how to do that. Remember, nobody's born doing this. You don't just make it up. There are rules to follow. You read the instructions, follow them. If it says write down a name, write down the name. If it says put a period, put a period. If it says this goes in quotes or in italics, put it in quotes or italics. It is literally that easy. But it also can be kind of confusing to look at sometimes. So first of all, don't tell yourself it's hard, because it's not. It's easy. It may be confusing. Second of all, don't expect yourself to know it and get it right the first time. We rarely do that with anything. Have that, I don't know, walking, talking, any of those basic things we learn, we didn't generally get right the first time. And finally, remember that I'm here to help you, that you have other sources. There's me, the Writing Center tutors are all, practiced at this, so they can help your book. And of course, so many other things out on the internet are there to help you. In the end, you double check and make sure that you got it right. So that's all I got, and we'll see you next time.